shortly on the program, hundreds of disgruntled residents from all over Perth and Bunbury formed a united front last night aimed at some of the Planning Minister's recent interventions. We're going to hear their concerns next on Drive on ABC Radio Perth.
Perth traffic.
Dana, hello to you.
Good afternoon. Well, we are still incident-free, which is great news. Those freeways are quite busy at the moment. Northbound building up around Belia Drive to Burton Drive. Start from Mount Stay Road right through to Hepburn Ave and then Shenton Ave. Southbound looking a little bit slow from Hay Street to Mill Point Road and Armadale Road to Rowley Road. Just a heads up, the North Bridge Tunnel is closed tonight from 8 p.m. to 4:30am tomorrow morning, to plan ahead to avoid any delays. Drive safely, and that's the latest from Main Road.
Dana, thank you.
8:30 Sunday.
The 2014 Australian of the Year, Adam Goods.
Walk with us on the journey to reconciliation with a special
Football's racism row has erupted again.
award-winning
We need to talk about this.
documentary from Stan Grant.
You can show others that there's a path from the worst of Australia to the best of Australia.
The Australian Dream.
What would they know? What it's like to be a black fella?
8:30 Sunday on ABC TV and iView.
8 minutes after 5 o'clock, you're with Geoff. This is ABC Radio Perth and the Drive program. Good afternoon. They came from far and wide, and in their hundreds. Disgruntled residents annoyed at what they say is the undemocratic way Planning Minister Rita Saffioti has made decisions in their areas. We talk about those areas. Well, I guess the most recent decision that made headlines was the Civic Heart project in South Perth. After 7 years, the minister intervened, confirming that 2 39 and 22-storey towers would be built. We've talked about Subiaco's local planning scheme. After almost 3 years of back and forth between the City of Subiaco and the Planning Commission, the government changed the plan, imposing higher densities in parts of Daglish, which will go from 25 dwellings per hectare possibly to 80. Then there's Nedlands. Minister stepped in to create a new local planning scheme. The intention to create higher density living near existing infrastructure. It would allow another 4,000 new apartments to be built. Then there's the ongoing battle in the Perth Hills. Higher density North Stoneville development causing a great deal of contention up there. Final decision on that is due in late April. Now, how many of you feel impacted upon and imposed on by these decisions of the Planning Minister? Because last night there was a collective front, really. 400 or so residents who felt they'd tried to negotiate in good faith but have had a planning decision made, quote, over their heads. I wonder if you were among them. 1300 222 720. What was your reason for going along? Ian Love is a Netherlands resident, one of the meeting conveners. Ian, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Geoff.
Why did you convene this meeting?
Well, we started in our back garden, but very quickly we learnt that it's not just about us, it's about our neighbours, and then it's across the whole of Perth. And so one of the really good things about last night was the conversation moved on from this NIMBYism, and we were looking at the broader issues. And what we were seeing, there was basically two common issues we're seeing. We think the minister, we know ministers have discretionary power. These powers are typically used in emergency situations, like, for example, a bushfire, where a minister may need to step in and quickly put in place some planning laws. But we feel that the minister has, on a number of occasions across a lot of areas of Perth, has used that discretionary power, and she's done so without sound justification, and this is really causing a lot of grief to the residents of Perth.
So she has, to your view, and those people last night, overreached or not considered well enough the concerns of residents in a whole range of places. We mentioned just some of them.
Absolutely. I mean, all acts have this discretionary power, but it's not uncontrolled discretionary power. And if a minister uses it, it just becomes essentially an autocracy. And in our democracy, thankfully we do have checks and balances. And one of the balances that we have as a check on ministers is the Corruption, Crime and Misconduct Act. And we're interested in the third word of that act, misconduct. And if a minister acts in a manner that is not impartial, then that's considered what's called a serious misconduct. And we think that could be happening. We're not suggesting that is, but we think it's worth asking the question. And the right party to ask that question is the CCC. And so we are calling on the CCC to look at these cases, and there's several of them, to see whether there is a question to be addressed.
Tell me what's going on in Netherlands that concerns you specifically.
So essentially, Netherlands has about 8,000 current dwellings. Under the Perth and Peel 2050, we were required to have another 4,400 dwellings, which we did. LPS 3 was passed by the City of Netherlands, and then there was actually a change of government before it was gazetted. And then shortly after the change of government, by the time new ministers get their feet under the desk, et cetera, the document came back to us yielding something like 29,000 new dwellings. Now, people questioned this and said, oh, no, don't worry about that. Only about 30% of the dwellings are going to get, the sites are going to get redeveloped. Well, what sort of town planning is that? The finger in the air method? I mean, just 8,000 existing dwellings, here's now 29,000 new dwellings. It's egregious, and that's just us.
Ian Love is my guest. He's a resident of Netherlands. He convened this meeting last night. If you want to talk about this issue, if you were there, this is all you have to do.
If it matters to you, if it matters to Perth,
We want to know about it.
call Geoff
Now on 1300 222 720.
1300 222 720 on ABC Radio Perth. This is Drive.
What about the argument, and I'm not sure it applies across the board here, Ian Love, and that is the entitlement of the minister to step in when there have been planning stalemates at local level. For instance, in the case of South Perth, the argument over a triangle of land that has sat as that empty triangle of land for a very long time without any decision to be made over its future. What's your view of that? Should that triangle of land just stay that triangle of land until you do come up with a better option?
Well, I think what's happened, Geoff, is the planning rules have been essentially weaponised by the property developers. And so there's a whole bunch of sort of methodologies they have to bash down the residents, the private landowners. For example, they'll say, well, let's just let them cook for a while. So up in the Perth Hills, perhaps, it's like, well, let's get them, they can have their protests and, but let them cook for a while. We've got 2, 3, 5 years to go and we're not in a hurry. And eventually, you know what's going to happen? We'll get our own way. So I don't want to comment on whether that triangle of land in South Perth should or should not be developed. I think the issue here is that the weaponisation of the planning process against private individuals.
What's interesting, we asked the Planning Minister, Rita Saffioti, to join us on the show. She's travelling. She will try and talk to us tomorrow. This was the statement she gave us. She says, I respect people's views, but I have a responsibility to make decisions in the interests of the whole state. The reality is that we simply cannot afford to continue at the rate of urban sprawl that we've experienced in the past. Density and infill development is a reality for all communities in Perth, and it makes sense for that to occur in communities that are close to the CBD and near public transport. It is not fair, she writes, for just the outer suburbs to continue to handle the entire load of future population growth. The claims being made about investigations are far-fetched and extreme. They don't advance the debate in a mature way. Well, I know you want that investigation, but let me just put that question to you. We do know that there is density and infill development happening. We do know that metropolitan Perth cannot afford to spread too far because the cost of infrastructure is enormous. So why not the inner city take this responsibility?
Well, that's a good question.
But it's a familiar argument too.
Absolutely. So the population growth of Perth is 1.1% for a start. So, we don't have a burning platform in terms of needing to provide new dwellings. That's the first point. Second point is last night we had people from Iluka. Iluka's north of Marmion. It's a brand new subdivision. We had people in tears last night about developments that are going on, apartment blocks overlooking their swimming pools, Geoff. We're not talking about, we actually encourage responsible development. We want to downsize as much as anybody else or let our children live in that neighbourhood, et cetera, et cetera. Those sort of platitudes that come from the minister again, when you scratch under the surface of exactly what's happening, and I'll put it to the Minister, I'll invite her to come out and have a look at exactly what is happening. And it is really, Geoff, I've got to say, it's shocking.
And to those people who don't live where you live, they'll listen to this, and I don't like this labelling of NIMBYs and things, because that dismisses serious concerns that people have. But they will also say that your suburb is one of a big blocks, big green blocks, genteel locale. Why can't other people live in that location, given that we are seeing more and more people living differently, not in those great big homes, more and more in apartments?
Yeah, no, and the point we're making, Geoff, is that the new dwelling yield, which would mean subdividing blocks or having duplexes or things like that, was agreed to by the City of Nedlands. That was done. 4,400 new dwellings was done. This is not about this. We've looked at the motivation of the Minister, and that's really the thing that she hasn't said, at least in that statement. But what she has said earlier, the motivation is about jobs. Now, there's nothing wrong with creating new jobs. That's a good thing to do. But it's not the job of the Planning Minister. The job of the Planning Minister is to have responsible planning. And what we're seeing here is an unfolding urban planning disaster at the hands of this minister.
One more question for you, a question for her. What would you like to ask Rita Saffioti?
I would like to ask Rita Saffioti to push the pause button. The new planning rules, which were issued on May last year, are not even a year old. This is the state planning policy. They're not even a year old. We have a very, very good new mayor in the City of Nedlands. She's doing a wonderful job. The councillors behind her, the communities behind her, and we're trying to develop local planning policies, local development plans, all of which can control some of this stuff, Geoff. But we haven't had time. And getting stuff through government, as you well know, is difficult. So push pause, call maybe an emergency summit, listen to us, show us some empathy, and we're not just whingers. We're here to help, and let's work together.
Ian Love, thank you very much for coming in. He was the convener of this meeting last night. We hope to have Rita Saffioti on the program tomorrow, and we'll put some of Ian Love's concerns to her. 1300 222 720.
On ABC Radio Perth, this is Drive.
You're with Geoff. This is Drive. What did you make of what you just heard? This is Paul. Good afternoon.
G'day, Geoff. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Paul.
Terrific.
Where do you sit or stand on this argument about the need to develop infill opportunity, but where that should go?
The City of Nedlands had its town planning scheme in place for 32 years. It wasn't reviewed until 32 years after. It takes a city a long time to develop. For the City of Nedlands to make the case that it shouldn't have development imposed upon it is without foundation. The concerns that you constantly have discussion about on this program, including climate change, including equity, the loss of biodiversity on our urban fringe, needs to be addressed. There's no question about that. Both sides of politics, the minister, previous minister, John Day, and the ministers that subsequently served after him under the Liberal Barnett government, and this minister have a common point of view. That is, more people need to live in metropolitan Perth because that's the fact. Everyone's voting with their feet. We can say everyone should only live on a property of 1,000 square metres, and you would have a conurbation, a metropolis that spread all the way to Geraldton. If we don't have density around our urban infrastructure, you get a loss of social justice by people that have to travel a long way to get to public transport. Typically, they're the people that can least afford it. And for people that are able to have barbecues in nice, slush, green, lush backyards, it's fabulous to say we shouldn't do anything in our backyard, but it has to happen somewhere. In terms of the issues that are of concern, the overlooking of gardens, the overlooking of people's homes, that's a very real and important issue. But more recently, last year and the year before, the state government, and this was started on the previous government's on the previous government's watch, in fact created a Design WA, which is a set of design guidelines to avoid the impact of new development.
Paul, thank you. We have talked about Design WA and its role in producing a better quality building. These are the texts, lots of them coming in. Eamon says, I'd love to live in Nedlands or Subiaco. Minister Safiotti's decision means there is more housing stock and more housing options, and therefore I now have a chance to live in these areas. Freo Cookster says there's plenty of room for higher density living in Nedlands. Much of the land is covered in water-sucking lawns, which is not only a waste, but environmentally unsustainable. I live in Nedlands in a townhouse, but there is an opportunity for well-designed apartment living, despite what the NIMBYs are saying. Lord is fighting a different battle. Lord, thank you. We are fighting Joondalup Council, who have allowed large blocks of flats to be built in quiet, small Duncraig cul-de-sacs. Low-impact infill is okay, not big developments. And Marg says, Geoff, I'm in love with Ian Love. Sane, sensible, reasonable and mature. Please, people, listen to him. 1300 222 720. Paige is from the Save Perth Hills group. Paige, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Gareth. How are you?
Call me Geoff. Gareth's the other guy.
Sorry, Geoff.
You must be on the radio quite a lot, Paige.
Well, this issue is front and centre, and we are calling united, as Ian said, from the hills down to Bunbury, up north, all throughout Perth, for some planning, sensible planning. We need to investigate the WAPC or audit them. We need to make sure that our planning processes are listening to community consultation. And last night we had about 500 people, as I said, from all over Perth. That was our first united stance. Some representatives of the Liberal Party were there. They heard us loud and clear that this planning will be a state election issue for 2021.
Sure, of course it will be, Paige. I've got a question for you. What did you share other than your individual grievances against Rita Safiotti's decision-making? Because not everyone's situation is the same. Your concern up in the hills with the Stoneville development is too many houses, it is fire risk, it's a whole series of considerations. In places like Nedlands and Daglish, it might be something a little different. What did you share other than the grievance against the minister?
That's a really good question. So our grievance isn't against the minister, but I did find her statement interesting that we can't have any more urban sprawl because North Stoneville is exactly urban sprawl. What we shared was the fact that the community consultation in the planning process is token. That we've got to act together because every one of our community issues is just a symptom of the planning problem. What we have is processes that do not listen or respect the taxpayer and the landowner's democratic or property rights. And that's why our next gathering will be on the 15th of March, Sunday at 9:30 in Mundaring at Sculpture Park. We have all sides of politics, not only speaking out in opposition of North Stoneville, but also speaking out on a platform because that's 1 year from the state election, speaking out what they're going to promise us if they're re-elected in the state election on planning.
Paige from the Save Perth Hills groups, thank you very much. We hope to have Rita Safiotti discussing these issues with us on the Drive program tomorrow. Let me go to your texts. John says, unfortunately, the City of Nedlands Council put its head in the sand for years. If they'd been more realistic years ago, they could have had much more effect on the outcome. It isn't just Nedlands. The Hills, Aluka are classic examples. It's about bad politics, says this correspondent, and not NIMBYism. To which Arthur writes, Geoff, I know you said you don't like references to NIMBY, but your guest sounded like a rolled gold illustration of the NIMBY case. Rob from Mandurah, tell him you can't stop progress. Get over it. Don't like it, then get out. Well, Rob, that is a little simplistic. People are entitled to express views on the amenity that they call home. They absolutely are. Sometimes the arguments are very valid. Sometimes they seem less so. Geoff, property developers are forbidden from donating to political parties in New South Wales. Should have the same laws here. Thank you. Lots of responses. We'll bring you the Minister tomorrow. This is Drive. We like to talk about things that's on your minds, that are local and important. Don't forget, it's the time of the week where we like to be a solutions-based program. There's no qualm or query too tiny for the trials of modern life. Let us know what is causing you conniptions. 0437 922 720. Sharon and Lucy will be here to solve your problem in the next 10 minutes or so. From 1983, ladies and gentlemen, this went to number 1. They should have been too shy to put it out, as far as I'm concerned. Kasha bloody goo-goo.